All right.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, Dan.
Okay, hello. So sometimes I like to talk a little bit in the beginning, and I always think like I'll talk for like 2 minutes and then we'll do the refuge prayer, but it ends up being like 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So let's just do the refuge prayer and then we'll start. And refuge, I'm gonna put it, do you know, am I able to share screen? Yes, okay. All right. Okay, so we'll go 3 times in English. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas and in the Dharma and all the noble Sangha. By the merit of accomplishing the 6 perfections, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas and in the Dharma and all the noble Sangha. By the merit of accomplishing the 6 perfections, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas and in the Dharma and all the noble Sangha. By the merit of accomplishing the 6 perfections, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. I'd like to start with 4 simple means of practicing mindfulness. And I want to start with these. And I'm going to actually read them directly from this book. I referenced this a couple visits ago. I just heard about it at the time, but it's called Say What You Mean. It's by Oren J. Soper, who is a mindfulness teacher who's also a trained nonviolent communication trainer. And so this is a really awesome book. Like, I've been loving this book, and he gives 4 methods of placing the attention that, you know, we may have learned in other contexts and in other practices. And as you may know, like when we practice shamatha and place the attention, that can be done on anything. And in fact, figuring out that is something we can do in any situation is a big part of the path, or at least has been for me, you know, recognizing that regardless of the situation, there's something I can place my attention on and it will help. You know, it's not an intrusion. It's not giving up the reality of the experience, or, you know, I notice it a lot of times because I think my initial reaction sometimes, if I remember to practice mindfulness, is kind of like, it's like, because I think like, oh, now I got to check out of this distraction I'm fully wrapped up in and actually try to be mindful for a minute. But when you go ahead and do it, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, you know, I like to joke, like, I've never meditated and thought like, boy, I wish I hadn't done that. You know, like, it just never happens. Like, you may beforehand feel like, oh, I don't know. But when you get done, like, there's never a time when you regret it, you know? So mindfulness is kind of like that too. So he gives 4 little methods here, and I want to start with these because I think this would be a good time to actually try to engage these during the rest of the talk. Because these methods are provided as a means of connecting in with the present moment in any situation. So the first one, and I'll just kind of walk you, we'll do this kind of like a little guided meditation. So for the first one, he says, sit comfortably. Start by taking a few moments to orient to your surroundings, looking around the room. Find a posture that's upright, yet relaxed. Feel any sensations of weight or heaviness in your body. This method is actually called finding gravity. You might notice that your body's contact with the chair, or you might notice your body's contact with the chair, any hardness or give in the surface you're sitting on. You might feel the sense of your whole body sitting, its mass or warmth. Let your attention rest with these sensations of weight. Can you feel the downward force of gravity? When you notice your attention has wandered, gently let go and bring it back to the feeling of weight or heaviness in your body. Anchor your awareness there. The second method is called the center line. Bring your attention to the upper body. Sense how your torso rises up from your waist and pelvis. Can you feel your back, shoulders, and neck? See if you can sense the midline or center line of your upper body. Try feeling your spine running from your tailbone through your back up to the base of your head. Or try imagining a line down the middle of your torso, halfway between your front and back, in the middle of the left and right sides of your body. Moving your torso can help reveal the center line. Rock forward and backward slightly till you feel the balance point in the middle. Do the same from side to side. And finally, rotate your shoulders and upper body 1 or 2 degrees to either side. Can you feel the axis around which the body is turning? That's the center line. See if you can rest your attention there on the center line of your body. Next will probably be familiar, the breath. As you sit, tune into the sensations of breathing. See if you can allow your attention to rest with the sensations of breathing in and breathing out. You don't need to block out sensations, sounds, or thoughts. Just tune into the steady rhythm of breathing in and breathing out, much as you might listen to waves crashing on a beach. It's normal for the mind to wander to thoughts, sounds, or other experiences. Whenever you notice, gently bring your attention back to feeling your breath, appreciating that mindfulness is growing. And fourth is touch points. Experience specific areas in your body that tend to be rich in sensation. First, put all your attention in your hands. Feel any sensations there, warmth or cooling, tingling, pulsing, or heaviness, maybe moisture or dryness. Rest your attention on any sensations you can feel in your hands. Now shift your attention to your feet, feeling any sensations there. Temperature, weight, texture, contact with the floor. Rest your attention with any sensations in your feet. Finally, we'll try shifting our attention between these 4 areas, but placing our attention on the sense of gravity. Shifting to the sense of our center line. Then to the breathing. And then to our touch points, hands or feet. You may notice one of these is more accessible for you. It's good to notice which ones help you connect most naturally with presence. So now I'm going to proceed not talking about that, but I'll try to check back on that one throughout the talk occasionally, because he goes on to explain that there's three kind of distinct ways we can practice this. One is in a formal setting. One is like during transitions, like waiting in lines or commuting. And the last one is like in conversations, like while listening. And he says when you're on your own, you want to give 100% of your attention to whatever the anchor is. During transitions, it'll be as much as you think is appropriate. And when you're interacting or listening, you put just 10 or 20% of your awareness there. And he says at first it may be awkward to do it during a conversation, and it may feel like your attention's kind of flipping back and forth. And that's normal. Over time, you'll learn how to balance external sensory data with a grounded internal presence. And it'll allow you to maintain a light awareness of your body during conversation or interactions. So the last time I was here, we talked about, I think the title was Vivid and Aware. And the way that I came about wanting to teach that was really thinking about what I'm going to talk about today. And so these two talks are not the same, but hopefully there's a sense of the similarities in them, or the common ground that they cover. And really, I was trying to think of some sort of somewhat controversial title or something, but so I was thinking conceptual addiction, or maybe more appropriately confessions of a conceptual addict, because this is really going to be mostly from my experience, and hopefully it'll resonate with you a little bit too. But I am an addict of concepts, and so training in presence is a good way to start to work with what is for us a natural environment of concepts. That's how we move through the world and society. That's how we work and purchase goods, eat and live and things like that. So we have to be able to find some kind of balance between our concepts and an openness, an open kind of awareness. And thinking foundationally of the Buddha's teaching of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha taught that discomfort is a part of life and that it has a cause. That cause is clinging or grasping. A lot of times we say too the idea of the self. And that idea of a self arises along with the idea of other. So there's a lot of overlap just with ideas of conceptuality here. When we're clinging to a self, we're inevitably clinging equally as much to the idea of other. When we cling to an idea of this, there's equally an idea of that. So being able to loosen that tight grip on the concept of self helps us loosen the grip on the concept of other. And like we talked about in my talk a month ago here, it's not like we have to pretend there isn't a sense of self or pretend that there aren't concepts we encounter. That's not the point. The point is to find some kind of balance between the two that's workable. And so I think concepts in a lot of cases are maybe the most often thing we mistakenly go to for refuge. But I guess it's kind of the only thing that we could mistakenly go to for refuge, because what's outside of that, really, I might be wrong. I'd have to think, but in any case, concepts are a thing we frequently find ourselves clinging to and going to when we want to find some kind of comfort or certainty or distraction. It's a thing that I think we all have some level of fixation on. And so the the real reason I wanted to talk today was because, or the real inspiration for this was that I started putting together the library for Columbus KTC, and it's a great library. We've got a great library team lead now who's taking it over. But I initially was going through all the books and figuring out what we keep, what we don't keep, all that kind of stuff, and it got me really thinking about studying. And in this last 2 years, I'm kind of young or new at this, not so much young, but I'm new at teaching this stuff. So one thing I've seen a lot through this last 2 years, and it's shined a big bright light on my own challenges on the path, is that a lot of us really want to read stuff, and a lot of us really want to learn about Dharma, and there's value in that, and it has to happen. But it can be a little dangerous, so I wanted to at least talk about that, because it's a powerful thing. It's this powerful stuff we're working with now. So the first thing that came to mind is, one thing that I heard Rinpoche say a lot, Karthar Rinpoche, the founder of KTD and our KTCs, is that the Karma Kagyu lineage is a complete lineage, and other lineages are also complete and authentic and powerful, And I heard him talk about this when I first started studying, and I had enough openness to not think that meant sectarianism, but I was intellectually engaged enough to wonder about it. Like, does that mean, like, there's some kind of prejudice here just for our own lineage, even if we say that, does it really mean that, and like, why, and so I had to kind of get a few years of teaching to start to really see why his instructions were that it's best to pick one lineage and work with that. And the main reason I see, just practical reason, is that there are very similar terms and practices in all of these lineages. And it's often the case that people will come to me with a question about a word or a concept, and through a little dialogue, I start to figure out that they've gotten that word from another practice in a different lineage, and it's just slightly different, and it's neither is right or wrong, but it is very much a source of confusion. It is very much a source of sometimes clouding the path we're on, and making things like a little more complicated. And I think that's because each lineage, as being authentic and powerful, is cultivating some sort of specific kind of view. And they're all very similar, and they're all leading to the same ultimate truth, but there's a certain approach that we each take, utilizing our relative truth, utilizing concepts which are illusory, and are relative and based on duality. We're kind of using what we've got to try to help us see the ultimate truth. And so we have to use this already imperfect mode, these concepts and duality and things like that, things we already have a lot of problems with, things that already cause us a lot of problems. We have to utilize those in a skillful way. So I think it's important. It's an important thing to keep in mind. I mean, the first word in the title of the talk I'm giving today is balance. And that's one thing I want everyone to remember, that's really nothing I'm saying here is something that I think is a hard and fast rule that you have to do. But this is information I hope that everyone incorporates, and start so that they can find their own balance with these things. So that's just in terms of study and lineage and things like that. That's one reason why you might want to be careful, as you study lineages and as you go along the path. Another thing about study that can be a little dangerous is there are, like, I like to think now about myself as kind of like somebody who lives in a city, and when you come to visit, I'm going to show you the city, and I'm going to show you in such a way that, like, you get the best views, so, like, we're going to not see the mountain until right when we go around that corner, and then there's the mountain and it's gorgeous, and you go, wow, and I think there's a lot of that in Dharma. there's a lot of that in Dharma in terms of like the different practices we do and getting them when it's time for us to have them. And so what I mean by this is like there are lots of times where people maybe read about practices that they're not doing, or maybe people tell them about practices they're doing that they're not currently engaged in themselves. And it's sort of it's not that there's no power there in that practice when the time comes around, but it's lost a little bit of its oomph. It's lost a little bit of its power to hit, and impact. And I think that we should all value that impact, of receiving that right teaching at the right time. Like we know what that can be like when something just cuts through and it's like an atomic bomb in our conceptuality. So something to think about. Also, in study, we can get it can cause us to desire and maybe attach to certain expectations of results. We read about maybe how things should be or experiences other people have had, and we start to wonder why we're not having it, or why our experiences are different, This also, I think, is a good reason why our meditative experiences are something we really probably should only share with our teachers, because number one, it's tough for us to really know what our experiences mean. That's why we need to ask someone who's further down the path and who can give us some sort of closer, more accurate view of what our experience means, But the other thing about experiences in meditation are they are positive or negative based on whether we attach to them or not. So like I remember another bit of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's advice in our retreat was not to keep a journal. And that advice came up because some of us were, and he was basically saying like, no, and I could tell why when he said it, because so often when we would ask about our experiences, he would say, could be good, could be bad. Probably best to just think of it as neutral, because if it's a good experience and you attach to it, then you kind of turn it into a negative experience and you're expecting it to recur, and you're wondering why it's not. If it's a bad experience and you're able to let it go, then you've turned that into the path and it's actually a good experience, So this is not to say there is no good or bad experience. I mean, we should check in with our guides about this. But my main point here is to say that expectation has a lot to do with what our experiences mean, and sharing our experiences with other people on the path. I don't think that has a lot of value. I think it's actually maybe a little bit dangerous to them, as well as us. So I don't think it's wise, So with this library at KTC, I was thinking about how a Dharma library is kind of like a pharmacy. Maybe the best way to think about it, because like in a pharmacy, some things may be over the counter. There may be a lot of stuff that's over the counter. You don't need a prescription for them. Doesn't mean you should take every one of them all at once, or maybe you don't even need any of them. And what I mean by that is our practice instructions are enough, really. And that's why we're called the practice lineage. And I can't remember what teacher, it was Tengo Rinpoche or somebody, I heard some quote of a Kagyu master saying, study is for when you're too sick to practice. So that's one side of things. Remember, we're talking about balance here. And I love to read, was just reading earlier today. So I'm not claiming that none of us are ever going to read again. But I think that concepts are where our habits have naturally put us. And so I think it's worth considering when we have a choice between reading or studying. Maybe we want to study, or maybe we want to, between reading and practicing, maybe we want to practice instead of reading, And that's really where it's at anyway, right? Because I mean, you can read all day about enlightenment, and it does not get you there. And Rinpoche said, no one's ever studied their way to enlightenment. He made a point of telling us that. So these things can always serve us. Books can always serve us. They can help us to contextualize our practice. They can help us to begin to use our concepts in ways that are actually productive. So there's definitely a use, but our addiction to concepts and our going to concepts for refuge will transfer over to Dharma stuff too, So it's something to really be aware of. And so back to the pharmacy analogy. There's also this idea of like how difficult and rare so many of these instructions were until quite recently, looking at that library at KTC now and how many incredible books we have in there, how many amazing volumes of teachings from so many different teachers and just all areas of study are in that library. And it's amazing, and it made me think like how much travel would have had to have gone in for an individual to get all that instruction, just like 100 years ago, I mean, we talk about how our lineage is 900 years old and the Buddha was around 2,600 years ago. And it's been, 70, 80 years here in the US, right, that we've had access to this stuff. Is it good? I mean, things happen fast when technology comes around, and sometimes we make big mistakes with it, one might argue like our climate is like a good example of that kind of thing. So we haven't had a lot of time to get used to having free and easy access to all the Dharma teachings that we could ever want, including restricted teachings, So it's worth thinking about the fact that, maybe we need to be a little careful about that kind of stuff. And these teachings are powerful and they have to be treated like that to be used safely and effectively, like medicine. And also just like medicine, you should probably only use them as long as you need to, and then discontinue use. That to me has been a bit of a journey for me, alternating between like getting way into studying and then realizing like, why am I feeling like overwhelmed and kind of stressed out? And like, oh, I'm neglecting my practice. I've been just in all the words and all the concepts, and that seems wonderful, especially reading about all these things and having these, I don't even know what the right word is anymore. I was going to say like realizations or epiphanies or insights, but the reason I say I don't know if that's the right word or not is because all of those things are conceptual. When we go like, oh yeah, I get it now. That's not recognizing the nature of mind. When we understand finally what it means to move between lives, or when we finally get some idea of what a bardo is, or these kinds of things, like that's not resting in the nature of mind. That's not resting in our awareness. It's not the same thing. Like when we talk about realization, and accomplishment in these practices, it's always an experience. It's always seeing the nature of mind or experiencing the nature of mind. It's not cognizing the nature of mind, So we have to be really careful about that like our insights, and even insight, I think in the technical sense, there is an aspect of it that is conceptual. I think there's this aspect we do need to study it to get a more correct view, but ultimately experiencing it is where fruition comes about. So we have to be careful about these kind of conceptual jackpot feelings, and I know for me, I realized at one point that that's like kind of what I was looking for and why I was reading so much, is because like every once in a while you read something and you go, oh, I got it. Like, that's it. Yes. And then you feel really good. You walk around, you tell all your friends about the cool thing you finally figured out. And maybe they understand or maybe they don't, because you just happen to be at the right place to hear that information and finally integrate it in a way that worked for you. May not go over the same way with people you're telling it to, but so we get this feeling of like a payout, every once in a while, when like a teacher says something that really gets through to us. And it is our positive karma and their positive karma coming together. The causes and conditions have come together for some sort of important, conceptual leap to happen. And there's goodness in there. There is. But of course, the issue is always attachment. The issue is always fixation. That's the cause of suffering. So we can't be like on the hunt for those sort of conceptual payouts. Like I've been referring to it as like slot machine dharma, where you're kind of just like getting, pulling that thing again and again, hoping you'll get some sort of conceptual breakthrough, and so the point here is not, again, it's not never to study, but just to have a complete view of a balance between our study and our practice. And we do need to study. It's important we learn about the life of the Buddha. When we start in particular, it's really important we learn about the life of the Buddha. And his story is really a story about his path, initially kind of enmeshed in conceptuality and enmeshed in by way of indulgence. In the castle, all the luxuries didn't work for him. So he went and did what he, at the time, I think, thought was the opposite, and went into full renunciation, and dropping out, and realized that alone doesn't work either. And so he found the middle way, which is not either or. It's a balance. And that middle way is not good or bad, or right or wrong, or indulgence and renunciation. It's between like an ultimate non-dual truth and our apparent situation right now. And our apparent situation is based on the idea of self and other, this and that. It's how we get around. It's how we are able to operate and do what we're doing right here today. And that can't just be thrown out. It's important. But we need to be able to strike that balance and see the inseparability of that conceptuality and its illusoriness, not grab onto it and make it seem more real and seem like something we really can hang on to or put under our feet as like some kind of solid ground. Then we get into like, so basically in the beginning there, like we can read about history, we can read about philosophy and psychology. Maybe in the beginning, the best thing for us to focus on, I think, would be like basic practice instructions in shamatha, and also analytical meditations, meditations where we examine, the self, like examine how things arise, how causes and conditions lead to our experience, how things arise interdependently, how things are neither a singularity or a multiplicity. These kinds of reading can help us to correct the conceptual side of things. Then there's also reading that we can do that helps us to kind of take apart conceptuality. So like the Mahayana, where we start to think about emptiness more. And there's Madhyamaka teachings, about how it basically like there's nothing that you can say is truly existent, including that argument. There's also practice instructions, that become like mind training instructions and ways of like if you think of like the 3 seeds in Lojong, where we talk about may this moment of anger contain the anger of all sentient beings. And by my working through this moment of anger, may I and all beings be free of anger and achieve enlightenment, which is the complete freedom from anger. Purely concepts, but completely beneficial in leading us towards a truer understanding of our actual nature. And all of those kinds of things are about doing something. They're actually worthless and truly dangerous if we don't diligently apply them. you know, if we don't actually try to apply them in our lives, you know, that's where the payoff actually comes. So often we think we get something, or all of a sudden something clicks, right? But I don't know about you, but I can tell you there's probably 10 to 1 the amount of times I think I get something and the amount of times I remember to apply it in the moment. Happens a lot, you know, and we think those times when we get it are few and far between. So this summer for me has been a lot. I'm staying in Cleveland, and there's a beach here. So I know you guys are right by a beach, and we have beautiful beaches in Northern Ohio too. I know you guys may disagree, because I know people get a little picky about their beaches, but it's beautiful, and we have sunsets. It's a western facing beach, so I've been spending a lot of time out there doing work on the beach and being there for a lot of sunsets and going in the water and floating around, and it's awesome. And luckily, I remembered a good bit this summer, more than usual, to just place my attention on my sensations, you know, or place my attention on the sound of the waves. First 5 times I was there, I had music on in my earbuds, you know. It was maybe the 6th time that I was like, I could meditate here. And that's actually a great place for me to start to integrate my practice with my appearances, you know. And I'm really glad I did remember, because then I started trying to make it happen more often, you know. But those are the ways, that's where we apply what we've learned. You know what I mean? I was sitting at the beach reading Rinpoche's Quintessence of Union of Mahamudra and Dzogchen for the first time, which is awesome to like be able to read one of his teachings I haven't read before. And it's brilliant and beautiful book about kind of just getting to know our mind. And it really starts out talking about how, let me see if I can find a good quote here real quick. It talks a lot about this stuff we're talking about today, honestly. It says the beginning of the first song, it's a collection of 8 songs by Karma Kagyu Rinpoche. The first one starts that the sutras, tantras, and commentaries are vast and numerous, but it's difficult for those with little wisdom and short lives to fully understand them. And Rinpoche in his commentary says, not only is it unnecessary to study all of the Buddha's teachings and all of the commentaries on them, but even if you devoted your life to doing so and had no time to practice, all your study would still not bring about your liberation. And Karma Kagyu's song goes on, even though you know much, if you do not practice, it will be the same as dying of thirst at the shore of a vast lake. It's possible that you will become an ordinary corpse on a scholar's bed. The Sutra and Tantra scriptures and the writings of scholars and siddhas of India and Tibet have great blessing, but it is difficult for ordinary beings to understand them. And Rinpoche says, of course they are worthwhile and valuable, but it is difficult for most people to understand them. It is also not necessary. So I share this because there is a practice taught in here. And there are lots of practices that I'm sure we've been taught. And I think there's most often, hopefully most teachers are giving us some sort of practical instruction we can apply in everyday life. I mean, anybody been on the center line or the gravity or the breath? Just a reminder. Yeah, so there's simple pith instructions that we can work with in our day-to-day life. And whatever instructions we've gotten from our teachers are enough. And that's one of the hardest things. I mean, Rinpoche told us again and again in retreat, like, just do this practice. Don't think about what's next, you know, but, you know, we've got this cool schedule and like, it's, you know, Khenpo Guru yoga and then Vajrayogini, and after that 6 yogas. And so we would constantly be like, oh, Vajrayogini starts in a month, you know, like, while we're in another incredibly profound and effective practice, you know. So our minds are split, like right there, you know, I'm mired in past, present, and future, even in 3-year retreat in the midst of these super profound practices. So I think a lot of times just coming back to the fact that like we have what we need in our practice. And if it feels like it's not progressing, or where we feel like we're not progressing, I mean, my personal advice is think about how much you're able to integrate it in every other part of your life. And if you don't know how, that's something to ask a teacher for sure, because there's always a post meditation practice for every meditation. And we know how our day is split up. Like, I don't think anyone here is spending more of their day meditating than not. So that should remind us how important the post meditation application of our practices is, you know. And it is possible to do these practices while we do anything. It may be slightly different, maybe modified from the formal practice when we've got this safe environment and we're just sitting on a cushion, but there's always a way to integrate this stuff. And I remember Lama Yeshe Jamsa, the translator, once said, you spend 5 minutes in the morning painting a painting, you're going to spend the rest of the day erasing it. So I think our practice is kind of a lot like that. You know, are we doing stuff throughout the day to help that painting we're creating, that experience, that, you know, seeming life that we're creating. So a couple other types of things we can study. Rinpoche used to say that during Nundro, it's incredibly important to read the namtars of lineage masters, the biographies of realized masters. There's also like the realization songs of masters, the dohas. And when you start to read these things, this is where I think we get the examples of how to put together the study and the practice, the conceptuality and the emptiness, you know, the appearance and the emptiness. And start to recognize that appearances are not a problem, you know, and concepts are not the problem. Attachment is the problem, you know, clinging is the problem. And if you know anything about the stages of the path, you know, the stages on the path to enlightenment, it's worth considering that the first thing that happens, according to the stages, is that we overcome the kleshas, the emotions. But then the whole rest of the path is clearing away gradually these more and more subtle levels of conceptuality. And that's the whole rest of the path. So we've got some work to do, right? And there's no reason not to start now. And that really means learning how to relate to our concepts. Letting them go to a certain degree, but also utilizing them in a positive way. And maybe the simplest way to say that is putting our concepts to work towards recognizing our true nature. And that can be a little bit of conceptual aha moments, but those aha moments should be the fuel driving us to the cushion, you know. I've had a busy week with a lot of stuff on my mind, a lot of like multi-day projects that like you're kind of, you know, there's times where you just got like a bunch of things running at once and it's hard to turn stuff off because, you know, you're not done and there's all these different things. And when those times happen, like and more often I'm remembering to take a break from the concepts, you know. I mean, meditation helps, a walk helps, a shower, you know, like any kind of thing where you can just stop thinking about it and let, you know, it's not like clearing away the mental clutter, but stop going through it, you know, stop digging through the bins, you know. And that helps me a lot, you know, that helps me a lot to take those little breaks from the concepts. And it doesn't mean that we can't be intelligent, that we can't analyze, can't talk about stuff and think about it. Again, this is really just about establishing some kind of balance, you know. And the last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of study is aspiration prayers, just real briefly. I don't really even want to talk about it. I just thought we could read the aspiration prayer of Mahamudra together, which is one of my absolute favorites. And this is, again, a really powerful thing to do in terms of concepts. If you're gonna talk, if you're gonna read, aspiration prayers is a great place to go. So let me put this on the screen. And we can just read through this together. And there may be things in here. Part of the reasons I want to do this is because a little bit of this is over my head. Are we seeing the aspiration prayer on the screen? Is that right? Okay. Some of this is over my head. I haven't realized it, and that's okay. So part of what I want to work with in doing this is just recognizing that there will be a little uncertainty, there will be a little ungroundedness, there will be a little mystery to all of this until we finish the path. So, and that all has to be okay, So let's start at the top. Homage to the Guru. Guru, Yidams of the Mandalas, and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions in 3 times. Kindly consider me. Support and bless the fulfillment of my aspirations. Streams of virtue unsullied by the threefold fixation are born on the snow-covered mountain of the pure intentions and actions of myself and all innumerable beings. May they flow into the ocean of the Buddha's 4 kayas. Until that is attained throughout all my births, all lives, may even the words wrongdoing and suffering be unheard. May we enjoy the splendor of an ocean of happiness and virtue. Acquiring the best leisure and resources, may we have faith, diligence, and wisdom. Relying upon good spiritual friends and receiving the essence of the instructions, may we practice them properly without obstacle. In all our lives, may we practice genuine Dharma. Hearing scripture and reasoning frees from unknowing. Contemplating the instructions conquers the darkness of doubt. The light of meditation clearly reveals the nature as it is. May the brilliance of the 3 wisdoms increase. The ground is the 2 truths beyond the extremes of eternalism and nihilism. Through the supreme path of the 2 accumulations, beyond the extremes of exaggeration and denial, the fruition, 2 benefits, beyond the extremes of samsara and nirvana is attained. May we encounter Dharma free from error and deviation. The ground of purification is the mind's nature, union of lucidity, emptiness. What purifies is the great Vajra Yoga, Mahamudra. What is purified is the stains of adventitious. I'm guessing that's adventitious stains. May the result of purification, the stainless Dharmakaya, be revealed. Severing misconceptions of the ground is certainty of the view. Sustaining that without distraction is the point of meditation. Training in all aspects of meditation is the best action. May we have the confidence of the view, meditation, and action. All dharmas are the mind's manifestations. The mind, there is no mind. It is empty of mind's essence. Empty, it is unceasing and can appear as anything. Having scrutinized it, may we find it. We mistake self-appearance, which has never existed, to be an object. Under ignorance's power, we mistake self-awareness to be a self. Under the power of dualistic fixation, we wander in the expanse of samsara. May we get to the bottom of ignorance and delusion. Not something, it is not seen even by Buddhas. Not nothing, it is the ground of all samsara and nirvana. This is not a contradiction. It is unity, the middle way. May we realize the mind's nature beyond extremes. Nothing indicates this, saying it is this. Nothing negates this, saying it is not this. Beyond the intellect, dharmata is not composite. May we realize the perfect ultimate truth. Not realizing this, we circle in the ocean of samsara. If this is realized, Buddha is not elsewhere. Everything is this. There is nothing that is not this. May we know dharmata, exposing the all basis. Appearances are mind. Emptiness is also mind. Realization is mind. Delusion is our own mind too. Arisen, it's stopped. Stopped, it's also mind. May we sever all misconceptions in the mind, not sullied by the meditation that is conceptual effort. not stirred by the wind of ordinary distractions. May we know how to rest naturally and freely, not altering. May we be skilled in and sustain the practice of the mind. May the subtle and coarse waves of thought be naturally calm. May the river of mind, unmoving, come to natural rest. Free from the polluting stains of torpor and dullness, may the ocean of shamatha be unmovingly stable. When looking again and again at the mind, which has nothing to look at, nothing to see is vividly seen as it is. That is the resolution of doubts about what it is and what is not. Without delusion, may we recognize our own nature. Looking at objects, there are no objects. Looking at the mind, there is no mind. Looking at both, dualism is liberated in its own place. May we realize the clear light, the mind's nature. This freedom from mental engagement is Mahamudra. Beyond extremes, it is the great middle way. As this includes everything, it is also called the great perfection. May we gain the confidence that to know one is to realize the meaning of all. Unceasing great bliss without attachment, the unveiled clear light, free from conception, and spontaneously present freedom from thought, beyond the intellect. May effortless experiences be unceasing. May clinging to experiences as good be naturally liberated. May the delusion of thoughts being bad be purified in the expanse. May ordinary mind with nothing to remove or add, lose or gain, unelaborate, the truth of Dharmata be realized. Although being's nature is always Buddha, not realizing it, we wander in endless samsara. May unbearable compassion arise in us. For all beings who suffer endlessly, the display of unbearable compassion is unceasing. Within that affection, its empty nature arises nakedly. May we cultivate this integrated path without error, constantly, throughout day and night. The eyes and clairvoyances produced by meditation, the ripening of beings, the purification of Buddha realms, and the completion of aspirations to the Buddha's qualities. May we perfect completion, ripening, and purification, achieving Buddhahood. Through the compassion of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, in the power of whatever pure virtue there is, may the aspirations of myself and all beings be fulfilled in accord with our intentions. That's one of my favorites. Anybody have anything they'd like to discuss or questions or comments? Yes, Charles. Oh, you're still muted.
Your comments about the vastness of the teachings. We have to understand that we have access to teachings that no generations before us have ever had. You might have a secluded village in Japan or Thailand or Burma or India or Tibet or Nepal. And they had one teaching and maybe one teacher, and maybe got to see one bodhisattva come through traveling, and that sustained them and brought them to enlightenment. And we've got access every day to groups that are sending us emails of masters in the Kagyu tradition who are giving and pouring out so many teachings. So I love and thank you for these teachings of mindfulness, because it expanded a horizon for me today. Kind of mindfulness has been my specialty from the beginning, but I'd never heard about the center point and using gravity, and so how valuable that was. Thank you. But I don't want us to get discouraged or over encouraged, but we have such a wealth of information in this Kagyu tradition to me, more and more, it's all so profound. I mean, it's becoming evident how infinite it is. I mean, with each of the Karmapas and all, and the teachers of today, they all have their own way to approach the teachings, but they all come back to the same basic points: mindfulness, shamatha, refuge, nundro, visual, yidam, or deity practices, bodhicitta. They all keep, they're just potters throwing different pots in the same direction. I mean, it's so vast. The other thing I wanted to mention was last week Daniel played a recording of a doha from Milarepa, and I've always been aware of the dohas, but I never was very good with poetry, so I never really was able to relate to them too well till last week. That him playing that, there was a Westerner, I don't know who it was, Daniel would know, who played one of Milarepa's dohas on a guitar and sang it. And it was just absolutely, he kept, there was a repeating line over and over. No matter how how bad things get, it gets better. He's in a place where pain and joy, it's experience. So it doesn't matter how painful, how bad it gets, it's still the experience. And it was such a joyful, that doha has been with me all week, and I really appreciate it. So those are just a couple of observations, but thank you for your teaching tonight. Very good.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, I really appreciate your comments. And, it reminded me, the one thing I don't think I said explicitly that's worth saying is like, and actually there is a quote in here, I probably won't be able to find it, but it said in Rinpoche's book here, something I'd thought for a long time, which is basically that like, it's about, oh no, I know, I read it somewhere else, but it's about how like the path is how we interact with the teachings. Like we can absorb all the teachings in the world, but until we understand like where the space is that lies between us and the teachings, like how those teachings apply to us and our situation, it's about making them personal, like they have to become a personal experience. So I appreciate your comments about the vastness too, because I'm sure you've got a better idea than I do about how many things they're uncovering, and it's just we always feel like things have always kind of been the way they are now, but we're in an ocean of written dharma and audio. Yeah.
Well, taking from Charles, I can put a link here in chat and we can read through a doha. But I would have to do sound share, right? Or can you do that, Lama Adam, if I just put this link here and then at the bottom of the poem is the audio?
Let's see. Is there a trick to it? I've never done it before.
Well, just click on the link.
Okay.
You'd have to do a sound share. If you go to screen share, I think it'll give you an option to share sound. Yes, you click on a.
Oh, I see. Share sound. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, but I think it's too hard for us to read. Well, if everybody clicked on that link in the, oh, there we go. Yeah.
So should I play it?
Yeah, let's play it and just see if we can all read through. We don't have to sing it because it's already being sung by Khenpo Sotum Gamso and Ari Goldfield.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do it.
When I realize everything's equality, I forget all about
that's awesome. Wow. And thanks for that, Daniel. That's really cool. Yeah, and I mean, there's this confidence, right? I think that's a little bit of what that song conveying, right? It's like we have to give ourselves some credit too, that like we've got Buddha nature. It's already in there. And sometimes you just gotta get out of its way, you know? So that's just another way to kind of say what we've been talking about.
So that link, that website has a lot of songs of Milarepa and Dohas from Khenpo Tsultrim Gyamtso, and then some have, at the bottom of the poem, some have an audio where they recorded, I don't know, maybe 20% or 30% of them have a song that was also, you know, sung and recorded.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's really neat.
Sure.
How do you know if you're ready for a particular practice? For instance, Nunye. I think that I mean it's always important to have a teacher if you can. You know, someone, even just a guide. Oh, I had a whole bunch of stories I won't have time to tell, but Lama Karma was in Columbus last week, and so and he and I were staying in the same house, so I got a lot of time to talk and hear a bunch of cool stories and stuff. But you know, he and I were both talking about this idea of like how just having someone who knows a little bit more than you is really enough. Like you don't have to like look forever to find a perfectly enlightened master. If you can find someone who has good intentions and is a little further down the path than you, then that's really enough to have a guide. It doesn't have to be your root guru. You don't have to like commit to them forever, but that's why I'm allowed to teach. Like I don't even know that I'm ahead of anybody, but I have learned some stuff maybe that everybody hasn't. So I can at least share, the little bit I've gotten that maybe isn't available to everybody. And so it's good to have someone that you can talk to about that stuff. And I always tell people too, another one of I think the main reasons to have a guide is because we tend to get mired in our habits, right? Like, spoiler alert, we get stuck in stuff. And so it's really important to have someone around to not only ask, like, is it time for me to do this, but to have somebody to tell you, no, it's time to move on to that now. You have to leave that behind and now move on to this. And Windrow was like that for me. I didn't realize when I started Windrow that was like my practice then. All the series of little things I'd done for 2 years and loved and was habituated to, all had to be left behind. And I met that with a little bit of disappointment. Like it was a little hard for me to realize, like, now I have to leave this stuff behind and go on to something else. But leaving things behind and going on to something else is kind of the whole reason we do our practice, to prepare for those times, So yeah, I think knowing when you're ready, I of course would always be, it's good to ask somebody, because for a lot of these practices too, you need to have a master to give you the transmission and the oral instructions and the empowerment. So it always takes, with a lot of these practices, it takes someone else. But yeah, Nunye, I wouldn't, honestly, I would have to ask Lama Kathy if there's sort of like benchmarks for that. But I know I've talked to some of my students about it, and I think in most cases they're good to go for that. And mainly because it's a Chenrezig practice, and Chenrezig is a deity that is fine for everyone to practice. There's some requirements for Nunye, like the reading transmission, and it's good to have the reading transmission if you can. But Chenrezig practices are at least Thousand Arm and regular Chenrezig are practices without a lot of restrictions. So I think that's a great practice, and that'd be a fun one to talk about too, because it is really wonderful. We were about to do one, but the COVID kicked up, and so we had to postpone ours in Columbus. But I think in most cases, I think most people can do. I couldn't think of a reason why I would tell somebody not to do Nunye, to be honest.
If you do one in Columbus, please consider actually doing it by Zoom and enabling people from afar to join and take the vow and hear the transmission and follow the precepts as well as the diet, just as if we were there. But there's an opportunity that I see amongst all of the KTDs and KTCs that Nune is pretty much limited to in-person practice. You have to be there to do it. And I've been kind of hoping that I could find it in our lineage, so, and Columbus is such a wonderful experimental experiment that'd be great to find it through them. That'd be something new. If it's permitted, I don't know. It's I don't even know. I brought it up before to Lama Karma and Lama Karuna, but
I'm glad you said that, because I brought that up too. So especially because there was a while when we thought we were going to do it, that was on the table as something we might do. So I'll continue to ask about it when it comes up again, because I thought that would be great too.
great,
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
think that's fantastic. Yeah, because we could include so many more people, and ultimately it's on each of us to keep up our vows anyway. So that's the way I see it. Whether you're in the building or not, you have to keep your vows. So yeah. Any other questions, Lisa?
Oh no, I was going to say great idea.
Yeah.
Lama Adam, I have one question about reading transmissions and empowerments via Zoom. It seems that it's really up to each Lama to determine on their own what transmissions and empowerments they will give over Zoom. Is that right? There's no fixed rule?
Well, I mean, we've gotten okay from KTD to do them over Zoom, and that's relatively recent.
Yeah.
I feel like it's best. I feel like it's best to do that stuff in person. You know what I mean? Like I would, but I'm open to doing them over Zoom. And I know I think there's other lamas that feel the same way. Maybe I don't know that anybody would say Zoom. I don't know. It's tough. It's just tough to say. It's one of those. And there was a while there where people were saying like, well, what about like when someone's in an arena and talking through a microphone? Like, isn't that kind of like Zoom, right? Because you would never be able to hear that individual if you were way in the back, if there wasn't some sort of amplification system, So, so it's been a road to get to where we are now, where they are now technically allowed over Zoom, and at least as far as KTD has told us. But I think there's probably still people that maybe don't want to do them over Zoom, or empowerments. I don't think are okay over Zoom. I don't, at least this in our what's coming out from KTD, I haven't heard anything about empowerments over Zoom, but I've heard other traditions are doing that.
Yeah. Okay.
That one would be a little tougher, right? Because there's always something that they touch on your head or something you drink, or so I think that one might be a little bit harder,
Okay.
The most simple way of explaining it. Anyone else have questions or comments or thoughts? All right. Yeah, go ahead.
It was kind of late, huh? No, I'll ask next
Oh,
time.
it's all good. No, it's fine.
Okay, so when you're doing a meditation and then afterwards, sometimes I think I wasn't in the right mind frame. I wasn't in I'm like beating myself up because I didn't do it right. Like, how do you what do you do about that? Do you just start over again, or just say it is what it is? Or
yeah, I mean, to me, I'm glad you asked that question, because I think that is the practice. I mean, I think about all these practices as being kind of like a mirror, like they're going to show you what your attachments are, and they're going to show you what your hangups are, and what your neuroses are. And so I think it's commonly the case that like we feel like maybe we're not doing a practice right, or a practice isn't resonating with us, or whenever it seems like there's something weird. Like I think a lot of times it's actually the meditation doing what it does, And so I would in almost every case like that, I would kind of examine if that's something that happens elsewhere in my life, you know, like
Yeah.
how I think and relate to, you know, everything, because in most cases, our practices are not about perfection or about correctness. They're about how we interact with it, you know, like how am I working with this? So
Mhm.
I would, you know, we had a guy in Columbus who used to say, Charles, I wish I could remember the guy's name. He was before my time, but he used to always say, the best meditation is the one that you did.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
I like that.
And
That's true.
yeah, and it really it contains this important instruction, which is we can't really be critical of our practice. You know, we can't really evaluate it, you know, and these practices work in ways that are a little bit beyond us, or not beyond us, maybe like ahead of us in a way. You know what I mean? Like they're taking us somewhere we may not totally know yet. And so, for instance, there was a person at KTC this weekend who took the empowerment, and I talked to this person afterwards, and they were a little frustrated because they were like, I didn't really understand what was going on. I wanted to know what was happening, and I felt excluded, and I felt like I've I've been there, you know, like I've definitely had that feeling of like actually feeling like excluded, like left out because I don't totally understand what's happening, or completely get it, or feel like I'm doing it right, you know, like it can
Yeah.
feel, it's difficult, you know, but the more whatever kind of wells up, whatever energy kind of wells up can be the anchor for your attention, you know, that can be the anchor for your mindfulness, whatever it is. And that's actually the best thing I think to do with it, you know, whenever we get those feelings, to kind of just put our attention on that without engaging in a story. And the more intense that energy is, the more powerful an opportunity for waking up it is, you know. So I think it on the one hand, the best meditation is the one we did. On the other hand, or maybe a different hand, I think that the opportunities that come up from the way we feel about our practice are opportunities, you know. And so you know, it's kind of like never look away, you know, like there's always something there to see. So I mean, we could have a longer conversation about that sometime too, if you want, because I love talking to people about their meditation. Like that's what I do a lot of. But I think in a lot of cases, that feeling of not doing it right is really, I don't want to say not correct, but like unnecessary, maybe, you know, and
Yeah.
it's probably
Doesn't,
just best left behind, you know.
doesn't mean anything really.
I mean,
Yeah.
what if it means anything? It means you're getting to know you better, you know.
Okay. Okay. I like that.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? This is thinking of it like a mirror. It's like showing you your stuff, you know, like that's always what meditation does, is it brings up our, nobody else's, just it brings up our stuff, you know. That's why, like, for instance, you know, I think I've told this story before, but I get real judgy in pujas. And it's not a good quality, you know, but I'm thinking about how people are doing things, or whether I think it's right or not. And that's just one of my extreme kleshas that I have to work with, you know. And so I'm glad I do, because I know that's one of my things, you know, and I got to work with it in traffic. I got to work with it in organizations. I got to work with it everywhere, you know. And luckily, these meditation practices have shown me that, you know, something I may not have seen before or thought mattered, you know. So, yeah, there's always something to learn. And I think in terms of shamatha in particular, we don't know how it goes on the cushion. Shamatha, you could see the results of shamatha in your day-to-day life. And I think that's probably the same for all meditation, although I'd have to think about it a little bit more. But I know, at least with shamatha, you know it's working when you're off in your regular daily life and someone says something that would normally upset you, and you have this little gap where you can actually decide, you know, how you want to react, and, you know, make an informed choice. That's the sign of success in shamatha. Whether it's a lot of movement in the mind during shamatha or a lot of stillness, doesn't make any difference, you know. It really, you can equally have as much effective practice Obviously there's means to, we want to manage it. We don't want to just let ourselves go off into lots of thinking or just space out. But in general, we can work with all those situations. So it's important, particularly with shamatha, not to be evaluating in the midst of the practice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does, definitely.
Good. Anyone
Thank
else?
you, Adam.
Thank you all. So I guess we'll dedicate the merit. Oh, Lama Karma made the best joke this weekend. He was like, let's dedicate the merit before we lose it.
That's good.
Act quickly.
That's
So we'll dedicate the merit tonight to all sentient beings, especially to David Lee. And I thank you again for having me here. And I celebrate all your practice. And yeah, we'll say the traditional prayer together. By this merit, may we achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood and defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings.
And to Jody, a speedy recovery.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. Get better quick.